Tonight we're going to be doing an NHL Draft Lottery simulation, taking a look at the teams with the best odds, who could pick number 1 overall, and we'll take a look at the top 10 picks and conduct a mock draft. And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned today, we're going to do a simulation for the upcoming 2021 NHL Draft Lottery, which is currently expected to be taking place somewhere around July the 2nd. So we have several teams that are near the bottom that are the most likely contenders for first overall. That would include teams like the Buffalo Sabres, the Anaheim Ducks, the Seattle Kraken, a new expansion team who were just confirmed today after making their final installment payment as the official 32nd franchise will be given the third best chances at first overall. Of course, teams like Detroit, Ottawa, down near the bottom as well. So obviously we'll take a look here. So let's hop onto the computer. We're going to run the simulation, see where the picks land. And then as I mentioned, we'll go through a quick mock draft here for the top 10 selections. And I'll give you my thoughts on who I think these teams will select. All right, so we're on the computer here on tankathon.com for the NHL Draft Lottery Simulator. Now, before we run the sim here to see who's going to end up picking first overall, just a quick look here at the odds. I'm going to flip over to that for a second in case you're not aware. So as you can see here with the odds, the team with the lowest ranked team here, the Buffalo Sabres, they have an 18.5% at first overall and only a 16.5% chance here at second overall. So obviously the odds are still against these teams for getting the top pick. So it's still not an easy task. So that is where the odds currently sit here as of right now. Now, of course, you'll see here that under the number 3 pick, you have Buffalo, Anaheim, Seattle are the only ones with odds because there's only going to be 2 lottery picks this year. So one of these 3 teams is guaranteed to be no worse than third place. So now let's jump back to the home here for the Draft Lottery Simulator. So let's take a look here now and see who wins first overall. Are we ready? All right, here we go. Boom, the Seattle Kraken have won the first overall selection of the third best odds here. Now, obviously, the Kraken are going to get a top 3 pick guaranteed, but in this simulation, they actually get first overall. New Jersey goes to number 2. So Seattle and New Jersey are the 2 simulation winners here for the top 2. That has Buffalo moving down to the 3rd overall pick. The Ducks going to 4th. Columbus in 5th. The Red Wings are in 6th. The Ottawa Senators will pick 7th. The Kings will pick 8th. The Sharks would pick 9th. And the Canucks would then pick here at number 10. So that's the very interesting. The Seattle Kraken, we know, are going to be getting some good players through the expansion draft. If they get the first overall pick as well, that would really be some very interesting developments there. So let's now take a look here at the mock draft. So we're going to jump over here and I'm going to tell you who I think each team is going to select. So with their first overall selection, the Seattle Kraken are going to take the 6'5" defenseman from Michigan, Owen Power. What an opportunity it would be for the Kraken to start building their franchise around potential franchise defenseman here. He's got huge size, great mobility. Like, this guy projects to be a top defenseman here in the NHL. And it's not clear exactly if he would go straight to the NHL or if he wants to return to Michigan. I would think he's going to do another year at Michigan, but no guarantees on that, I guess. Obviously, it depends on what the Kraken and he and his advisors feel is best. But still, that would be absolutely huge. I think it's a no-brainer that they would take Power first overall. The 2nd overall pick goes to New Jersey, and they are going to take the brother of Jack Hughes, Luke Hughes, who the Devils need help on the blue line. They have a good mix of some solid young forwards they've been able to draft in the last few years. They have Hughes and Hischier and Alexander Holtz and others that are playing well, but they really need help on the blue line. They've got a great young goalie in Mackenzie Blackwood. Luke Hughes could join his brother in New Jersey and be one of those top 4 defensemen that the Devils really need to take this rebuild here up a level and to become stronger contenders. And it would certainly be fun to see the Hughes brothers playing together in New Jersey. The 3rd overall pick goes to the Buffalo Sabres, and I have them taking top center Matthew BENIERS. Obviously, the Sabres are going to need help at the center ice position, especially if they do explore a Jack Eichel trade this offseason. I mean, Casey Middlestat has finally been playing a lot better recently, so there's still hope for him to be a top 6 center. But depending on what happens with Eichel, they need that insulation at that position. It's a key position that you just can't go without. And clearly, even if Eichel stays, they could still use a center regardless. So I really think they take BENIERS here, which would be a huge help to their team. Next up, at 4th overall, we have the Anaheim Ducks, and I have them selecting Swedish defenseman Simon Edvinsson. Now, he's a 6'4" defenseman from Frölunda, 185 pounds, getting a lot of rave reviews. I know his game against Canada at the U18 tournament a few days ago wasn't the greatest, but typically this kid gets a lot of great reviews. And if you look at the Ducks roster and how they're composed, they have more coming in the forward group than they do on the blue line. There's some talk they might be able to turn over some veterans out of that blue line, like a Josh Manson or a Hampus Lindholm. So there will be opportunities to rebuild a younger blue line in Anaheim, and I think Edvinsson could be a huge part of that moving forward. Next up, at number 5 overall, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, and I have them taking another top center here, Kent Johnson. Now, the Blue Jackets are a team that desperately needs a top 6 center, and this is going to be the way they have to go about getting it. They're going to have to draft him, because obviously trading for one is going to be awfully tough, especially with what the assets they have. They already have moved Pierre-Luc Dubois in an effort to pick up Patrick Laine, and they need help now at center because of that. So obviously Johnson is another member of the Michigan team. Clearly, this team in Michigan could be putting out as many as 4 top 10 selections in this draft. But Kent Johnson's exactly what Columbus needs, and I just don't see how they don't grab themselves a top center if they get a chance to pick this high. Next up, we have the Detroit Red Wings, and I have them taking goaltender Jesper Wallstedt. Now, Wallstedt, to me, he's the perfect player for the Red Wings. They really need a little bit of everything in this upcoming rebuild here. They could use help at all positions, really. So they need to take, ideally, though, either Wallstedt or a top defenseman. They do have some prospect D that are okay, but they don't have anything that's real high-end or close to being elite talent. So they need to be able to really take advantage of this draft. It's not a super deep draft, so the fact they're going to be picking again in the top 6-7 picks will go a long way here. But depending on where things go for real, when the real lottery is conducted, if they have a chance to grab a guy like Owen Power, Luke Hughes, they will do that. But if not, Wallstedt definitely should be their pick. Next selection belongs to the Ottawa Senators. Now, the Sens already have an incredibly deep prospect pool, but I have them taking William Eklund in this selection. The Senators are now a team, with considering how many prospects they have, that they can be patient, let guys develop for a year or two. Eklund's 5'10", 172, playing out of Sweden. He's versatile. He can be a center or a winger. So I think this is a good selection for them. He's a different kind of player that they don't have a lot of. They do have a lot of young blue liners now. They have Jake Sanderson on the way. They have a lot of good young goaltenders in this system. They have tons of young forwards, Kajak, Norris, Batherson, Timmy Stützle, just to name a few. They really don't need, there's no glaring needs based on what their prospect pool and young players that are at the NHL level are delivering right now. So I think they just go with what they feel is the best player available. And I think for them, that would be Eklund in this case. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Kings picking 8th overall, and I have them selecting another top defenseman here, BRANDT CLARKE. Now, I could see CLARKE going anywhere from potentially like 3, 4, 5, all the way down to 8 or 9. It kind of depends on who ends up picking where, but the Kings are a team, again, very, very deep prospect pool, like Ottawa. They've had a lot of good picks here in the last 2 or 3 years, and there's really no glaring needs per se. They could consider going for the goaltender with Wallstedt if he's available when they pick, because, that clear-cut younger goalie of the future may not be in the system yet. But they have tons of prospects and forwards and defensemen. But I'm looking at BRANDT CLARKE thinking, you know what, longer term, he could eventually be that top pair guy that replaces Drew Doughty down the road. Clark is a real high-end defenseman. And like I said, he's a little bit of a mystery pick because it really boils down to who needs a top D compared to a top center. But I don't see him going by the Kings if they end up selecting where we have them here in a simulation. Next up at number 9, we have the San Jose Sharks, and I have them selecting Dylan Guenther. Now, of course, Guenther's another guy, 6'1", 170 pounds, playing in the Western Hockey League for Edmonton. Another player that could be a huge help here to the Sharks. Like some of these other teams we talked about, like a Detroit, for example, the Sharks really do need a little bit of everything. So it's a little bit of a tougher pick to kind of narrow down here. So they have to determine who they like the best out of what players are left that should be available for a top 10 selection. I think Guenther is the kind of player who can certainly help out here. Like I said, they need a bit of everything, and he is a guy that would fit well. He's certainly had a a solid year in the brief Western Hockey League season he's been able to play this year. He's playing for Canada at the U18s right now, and I think he would be a good selection here for the Sharks. And next up at number 10, we have the Vancouver Canucks. Now, for this mock draft, I have them selecting FABIAN LYSELL. Now, I think preferably, I'd like to see the Canucks. I think they need to go for another top young defenseman. But based on where they're picking, I'm just not sure that it's worth, maybe taking a chance on another defenseman. I mean, they could look at like a guy like Carson Lambos, perhaps, or maybe Corson Kuhlmans. That's a possibility. But picking a number 10 overall, do they want to use that kind of selection on one of those guys? Do they feel that that's a bit of a reach, or should they end up going with something that they feel is the best player available? Do they maybe even trade to pick if they're at number 10? Consider getting an already established NHL defenseman by trade. That's a possibility. Or do they maybe trade up to grab a guy like a BRANDT CLARKE if they're able to, depending on how the picks are going? Or do they maybe even trade down, get an extra asset here, make like a second or third round pick, and maybe grab one of these other D that we already talked about? But I think LYSELL would be a good pick for the Canucks. But considering where they are at number 10, I just think it's not the most ideal. I think they could make better use here, and I wouldn't be surprised if they are in this kind of spot that we do see some sort of a trade. That is your draft lottery simulation here for today in my mock draft. Let me know your thoughts on anything discussed down below in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.